Hey guys, Tony here, and this video is going to be all about how to divide up your budget when it comes to building your home theatre. Having gone through this a few times now, I've learnt better ways I could have spent my money for the best returns and gains in performance. It's something that I wish I'd known more about when I started on my home theatre journey, and I'm going to share my experiences with you, so stay tuned. Right, so before we get into the video, I just want to say that all of the things I'm going to cover off are my opinion only. I'm not a professional home theatre installer, and I'm all about DIY and giving things a go, as I get a lot of satisfaction from doing things myself. Not to take away anything from professional installers, my channel and what I show in my videos is simply things that I've learned along the way and has a big focus on DIY. Most of the people I meet can't afford big budgets often required to build a textbook home theatre, and like me, they want to give it a go themselves. Where it began for me was the desire to have a dedicated space for a home theatre. I'd seen videos on YouTube of people that had rooms kitted out to look like a movie theatre, and that really appealed to me. But like most things, when you're at the ideas stage, you have no clue where to start. So I began researching. And this didn't get me very far because each step led me down a rabbit hole, and before long I was more confused than when I'd started. Now I have made some other videos showing some of this, which I'll link in the cards up above, so I won't delve too much into it in this video. But knowing how to divide up the budget was one thing I was closer to the mark on than some of the other decisions that I made. If I was to start again knowing what I know now, I would definitely be starting with the seated position. By analysing the room dimensions, you can roughly work out where you want to sit in the room and whether or not you will have a single row or two or even three. I won't go into specifics, but if your room is only big enough for a single row, you can then decide on your speaker configuration, screen size, and also the options for projector screens, as you may be limited by the throw distance. For this video, I'm not going to specify any dollar amounts, but we will be talking about how to break down the budget you may want to allocate for each section. So the main elements in building a home theatre can be broken down as follows. You have speakers, projector, the screen, seating, decor, sound treatment, lighting, the rack, AV receiver or processor, amplifiers, streaming box, media player, UPS power conditioners, wiring and cabling. Each of these things are important and necessary. However, depending on your overall budget, it is best to prioritize your spending so that you can get the most out of your home theatre in the long run without having to upgrade because you made a bad decision. Items which are subject to short-term technology changes, such as AVRs and projectors, should not take priority over something like speakers. Speakers can last decades, whereas an AVR with a chip-based processor can really only last the life cycle of what's baked into the chip. As soon as a new format is added or a jump from 4K to 8K becomes mainstream, the AVR becomes obsolete and requires upgrading if you want to adopt the new formats. So I think the biggest chunk of your budget should be spent on your audio. No matter what your budget is, you will get the best return on investment with having the best speakers you can afford. I'm not recommending one brand over another, but in terms of your budget, if you can stretch the biggest chunk of it towards the speakers, you'll be enjoying them for many years to come. My buddy Matt, who is allowing me to mention him in this video, first set up his home theatre with existing speakers from the house he bought. He decided to upgrade to bigger Klipsch in-wall speakers, but before long he realized they didn't give him the experience he was looking for, so he decided to upgrade again to the Klipsch THX line of in-wall speakers. Matt was still able to recoup some of the cost by selling the older ones, but still, if he'd reserved a bigger chunk of his budget initially, he wouldn't have had to upgrade them so soon. I went through something similar with my own home theatre setup, first of all opting for smaller bookshelf Klipsch speakers, and then recently going for the Krix MX10 setup, which for this room and the size of the room is pretty much an endgame setup. In both Matt's case and my own, these final speaker choices will last the lifetime of the room without any real need to upgrade them further, and recently I made a video, which I'll link above, which I will break down the cost of building my new home theatre, and you will see how much everything cost and the relationship between each choice. The next thing on the list is amplifiers, and I don't mean your processor or receiver. If you're going down the route of a preamplifier processor, dedicated external amps are something that will give you a great return on investment with big improvements to sound quality, while also being able to last for many, many years. External amplifiers also take the strain off the receiver, which will keep it cooler and give it a longer lifespan. One of my biggest regrets is not reserving part of my budget to go with external amplification. One of my next upgrades to the theatre will be going with an Electra 3-channel amplifier for my soundstage. While not necessarily a high cost, cabling and wiring is a big consideration when building your home theatre. Once you know what sort of configuration you are going for, reserve some of your budget to getting the cabling done properly, terminating with banana plugs to your AV receiver point, and if necessary, wall plating your speaker locations. Copper is copper, but make sure you get something that matches the setup. I'll leave a link in the description down below to a calculator that helps you work out what gauge wire to go for depending on the impedance of your speakers and the distance to your amplifier. Cabling is often overlooked when building a home theatre. This was a big pain point for me when I built mine, having to rerun cables 3 times to go from eventually a 5.1.2 setup to what I have now, which is a 7.2.6. Installing tubing would also allow you to put HDMI cables through, so upgrading will become far easier. So dedicate a chunk of your budget to cabling requirements. Next on the list for me is the processor or receiver. While the technology changes can be frustrating, it's just a fact that they will happen. Receivers and processors are both high-ticket items, and while they are super important because they are responsible for passing the image to your display and processing and amplifying the sound signal, they have a nasty habit of being outdated pretty quickly. If you don't have a massive budget, make sure that you don't chew up the large percentage of it on your processor or receiver over something like your speakers. There are plenty of options for receivers out there, so getting a lower spec model, if necessary, is a better option than buying a really high-end one and having speakers which are really lacking. The receiver is important, yes, but not at the expense of good speakers. Recently, I purchased the Denon X8500H, which cost me around 7,200 Australian dollars, and it has already been superseded by an 8K model. On this point, I made the decision to go this way due to my budget, as powering a 7.2.6 setup using external amplifiers and processors would have set me back more than double the cost of the X8500H, and I know that in the future I can work towards upgrading it, whereas my speakers will not require any upgrading at all. The next one on my list is the projector. I'm not considering a TV for this video, as to me a dedicated home theatre is all about having big picture and immersive cinematic formats. So you can substitute this for a TV if you like, but the projector to me is something that should be considered at this point of the budget. Some may find it more important, and that's totally fine. This was my impression of where it fits into the scale. A great 1080p projector even now will give you a great experience, and you can pick one up for under $1,000. Same with pixel shifting 4K projectors. You can get one for between $1,000 and $1,500. Again, it's subject to fast technology changes. Spending massive dollars on a true 4K projector as a priority over your speakers, in my view, would be a mistake. If you have the budget, by all means, but getting a good quality screen to pair with a budget projector while having the best speakers you can afford will give you a much better experience than the high-end 4K image and really cheap speakers. Projectors have also come down quite a bit in price in the middle range, and it's generally something that you can upgrade pretty easily once you've saved enough. So I'd put the projector at this stage of the priority list when it comes to splitting up your budget. Now, on the flip side, if you are wanting a very high quality visual experience, you may choose to put more of your budget here, and that of course is totally reasonable. But I'm basing this list over what I found to give the best return on investment. I went with a mid-range projector, which was the Epson TW9300. It's not high-end by any means, but was affordable and gives a fantastic image that impresses me each and every time. Now that you have these bigger ticket items out of the way, you can start looking at things which are not as critical to the viewing experience, however are still very important to consider. These are your lighting, seating, decor, as well as sound treatment. With sound treatment, you can make your own acoustic panels pretty cheaply. I did my own movie poster acoustic panels for my first version of the theatre, and they didn't break the bank and made a massive improvement to the sound quality. Lighting is always something you can add later or improve by simply adding some RGB light strips or light globes like my buddy Matt did. Seating is a high ticket item or can be a high ticket item, but again, I wouldn't prioritize an expensive recliner over something like speakers, which sadly I have seen done. Next, you may consider an AV rack or some dedicated shelving to house your AV gear. It doesn't need to break the bank, and you can also get a surge protector power board, some of which already have a small battery in them like a UPS to keep the gear running long enough for you to power it down safely. You can also get power conditioners to make sure that your gear does get clean power. Smaller ticket items, but still important nonetheless. Remaining budget, which is still fairly low down on the list in terms of expense, would be something to use to play your media, such as a Blu-ray player. I personally use the Panasonic UB820, which is affordable but produces fantastic image and sound. I'll leave a link down below if you're interested. And for streaming, you could use an Apple TV or Nvidia Shield Pro, Roku, or Google Chromecast. Again, this list of priority doesn't mean that each component isn't vitally important to build a home theater. They are all important and all have their place, but getting your priorities in order when working out your budget means making smart decisions about how to divide it up. I have spoken to so many people who come to me asking for advice on speakers before they even know the size of the room or what configuration they're going to use. Often they speak of a $3,000 total budget to their home theater and they wanted to include everything, not realizing all of the components that go into it. My advice is before even working out a budget, start familiarizing yourself with each of the categories and components that I've mentioned here in this video. Get a feel for what goes into setting up a dedicated room, make lists of different prices for each item, and from there you will get a feel for what you can afford. If you have a 10K budget and the seating is 7K, you may need to downgrade your expectations for your seating a little so that you can spend 5K on your speakers instead. Again, not a hard and fast rule, but just think about where you'd like to get the most return on your investment for the longest time. Anyway, that about wraps up the video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And if you have any questions, you can join our Discord community. I have links in the description down below for that as well. If you enjoyed the video and found it helpful, make sure you smash the like button for me. And if you enjoy content like this, consider subscribing and hitting that bell notification so that you'll know when I make the next video. Anyway, that's it for this one. You'll catch me in the next one. Bye for now.